What external drive should I get? Hi everyone, Leo Notenboom here for askleo.com with a very common question, given how often I recommend using external drives for the recommended daily backup. Let's look at some of the things to look at when you're thinking about what to get. The first thing to be aware of is what I'll call capacity. Make sure the drive you get is big enough to hold the backups you're looking to create. Now, of course, that's going to be a factor of how long you expect to keep your backups, what kind of backups you're doing, and so forth. My rule of thumb is to make sure your backup drive is at least 3 times bigger than the amount of data currently stored on the drive you're backing up. So for example, if my drive has 442 gigabytes of data on it, then I would make sure to get an external drive that is at least 3 times that much. Since 442 gigabytes is roughly half a gigabyte, I'd round up to 1.5 terabytes for an external drive. Now, the good news here is that external drives are actually pretty big these days. It's not hard to get one that is bigger than what you need. And as with most things storage related, you can't go wrong by getting a bigger drive. So given that 1.5 terabytes is probably not that common a drive configuration, I'd get at least 2 or 4 or 6, because the incremental cost for each of those, not really that much, and that will increase the usable lifespan of that external drive as your needs over time will inevitably expand. Today, you've got half a terabyte. Next year, 2 years from now, you might have a terabyte. And all of a sudden, those backups could be pushing the limits on that 1.5 terabyte drive. If you get something much larger today, you'll be prepared for when that happens. Now, the other thing to look for is what I refer to as the technology. There are 2 things I want to talk about, the interface and then the actual storage technology. You'll want to make sure that your drive is USB 3 or better. Fortunately, as I record this, it would be really hard not for it to be USB 3 if you're getting a USB drive. The reason USB 3 is important is because it's faster than its predecessor, USB 2, significantly faster, fast enough so that the interface is no longer impacting the amount of time a backup is going to take. With USB 3, it'll just happen faster than if it were USB 2. There really is no reason not to get a USB 3 or faster interface these days. Just do that. The other question that comes up a lot, as it turns out, is SSDs. There are external SSDs, absolutely. It's not worth it. They are more expensive for the amount of storage that we've talked about. In other words, if you, for a given amount of storage, say 2 terabytes, an SSD is going to be more expensive than a traditional spinning magnetic platter hard drive. There's no point. There's literally no point in having that for your backup drive. SSDs are great for what they do. They are faster to read from. When you're backing up, you're not reading, you're writing. They're just as slow, usually, as a magnetic hard drive. If you're going to get an SSD, use it as an internal drive for your day-to-day work. The expense just isn't justified for an external drive. Now, I will say that there's one interesting exception. We are now at the point where you could be recycling an SSD out of an older machine. Great. Throw it in an external enclosure if you like, and then use it as an external drive, assuming you don't have a better use for it as an internal drive or a work drive somewhere else, and assuming you have checked on its expected usable lifespan. But both of those are kind of opportunistic. Like I said, if you've got an external SSD or if you've got an SSD you're ripping out of a machine, feel free to throw it in an external enclosure and use it. There's no reason not to. But if you're about to buy an external drive, there's really no reason to spend the extra money on an SSD for backing up. Now, there are 2 approaches to power. Usually smaller, sometimes slower, external drives actually don't require any power. They will get all of the power they need from the USB connection. That's convenient. That's great for portable drives. That's what I do with the external drive I take along with me when I'm traveling, because it's a small thing I just throw in my backpack and I've got a backup drive with me wherever I happen to be. If you're backing up a desktop, as I am, then it can be convenient to use one with an external power supply. These drives are usually physically larger. They are often larger in terms of capacity. They will have a larger disk inside of them, and they're often faster. Now, that actually brings up a couple of interesting characteristics that aren't really as important as you might think. One is what I call physical size, the actual physical size of the drive. It doesn't really matter. What will typically determine the physical size is that power supply issue that I was just talking about. Usually those portable drives are 2.5-inch drives, and usually the powered drives are the larger 3.5-inch drives that you might actually also see inside of your machine. Those determine the size, but other than that, unless you're taking a drive that was an internal drive and turning it into an external drive, that's really the only time you need to worry about size, just so that you get the right sized enclosure. The other one that a lot of people seem to spend a lot of time worrying about is rotational speed. Drives spin at different speeds. It's very common for portable drives to spin at 5,400 RPM. Internal drives, the 3.5-inch drives, the bigger ones, will often go at 7,200 RPM or even faster in some cases. And yes, it does mean that the drive can transfer data somewhat faster. I don't care, not for a backup drive. Not for a drive that's on the other side of a USB interface. If we were talking about a drive you were going to be installing in your machine, great, we'll have a different discussion. But for a drive that's external and being used for backing up, rotational speed is just not something I consider whatsoever. I will happily choose a slower drive if it's cheaper, because there's no point in spending the money on a faster drive unless you're going to be putting it inside. So with all that out of the way, it's difficult at this point to then say, well, go get this drive or go get that drive. Because as you can imagine, the characteristics of drives, the quality of manufacturers, it all varies over time. As I'm recording this in September of 2021, I will point you at a couple of drives that are listed in the article on which this video is based. That article does periodically get updated so that the links there may be more up to date than what I'm about to tell you now. So I strongly recommend you go take a look at it. These are, again, just recommendations. They're kind of sort of drives that if I had to buy a drive today, these are what I would buy. So for an external portable drive, the Western Digital 4 terabyte My Passport it's a nice little drive. In fact, I do have a few of these lying around. They've been good for a little while. They are increasing in capacity. As you can imagine, my oldest drives are 0.5 terabyte. The newest one are 2 terabytes apiece. This is what I throw into my backpack when I travel. For an externally powered drive, the drive that I've gotten for a couple of my friends, and so you can imagine that has perhaps even a slightly higher quality import than just something I might get for myself when I can deal with the failures myself, are Western Digital MyBook desktop external drives. These range in capacity from something like 4 terabytes or 3 terabytes up to like 28 terabytes. The 28 terabyte one is actually bigger. It's physically bigger. I think it has 2 drives in it. But these have proven to me to be good drives in recent years. A couple of my backup drives now downstairs, hooked up to one of my Linux machines that I use for local backup. They are these drives, and they are working well. I literally did buy an external drive for the machine that I'm using today not that long ago, and it's different than the recommendations that I just gave you. It might be a little bit pricier, but I bought it because of my experience with this specific company prior to this. So what I have, what I'm literally using right now is a G Technology 6 terabyte G drive. It's an external drive. It's got a separate power supply. It's a fine external drive. And in fact, I've actually done live editing on it so that I'm actually doing video editing across a USB 3 interface, which is surprising to me. It's still better to do it internally, but I can do it externally. In fact, I've also run virtual machines across that USB interface. So that gives you some idea of the drive's speed and resiliency in being able to handle that kind of traffic and that kind of work. The reason that I got this drive for my work machine today, and when I say today, the machine's like a year and a half old. The drive is about a year and a half old. I had a prior experience where I got another G drive that I used for many years with my Mac Pro. It's a 4 terabyte drive, I think it is. It's an external drive, but it's got its own RAID configuration. It served me really, really well as my true work drive when I was using my Mac Pro as my primary desktop machine. So the manufacturer, G Drive, actually got some good reputation, at least in my eyes, based on that. So when I decided I needed a second drive for this machine, or an external drive for this machine, that's what I ended up getting. Right now, that's where my Macrium Reflect nightly backups go, or to that external drive. I need to close with something that is, I think, really important to acknowledge, in that opinions are super easy to come by. You will find that there are people who will agree with what I've recommended, who will vehemently disagree with what I've recommended. There are various reasons for that. Don't get me wrong. One of the problems in the disc industry specific is that it seems that disc quality is cyclic. By that I mean a manufacturer that's really good today and a manufacturer that's really bad today may swap roles in 2 or 3 or 4 years. So if you're watching this 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, the manufacturers that would honestly be recommended might be different. It's one of the reasons I point you at the webpage, because it's the webpage that I'm able to keep up to date with some current recommendations. When I updated that article for this video, I was very pleased to see that the recommendations remain stable for at least the last 2 to 3 years. I'm hopeful that's going to happen for a while, but nonetheless, check it out. That article on which this video is based is askleo.com/17616. You can also make sure to check there for any updates, like I said, for the updated recommendations, for the comments, both positive and negative, that I expect, for related links and more information. Hope that was helpful. Hope that gets you purchasing the external hard drive you need. I'm Leo Notenboom. This is askleo.com. Thanks for watching.